David pulled into his driveway after a long day fixing computers at the office. His shoulders were tight, his mind already on dinner and maybe catching the game later, but something yellow caught his eye. A bright envelope was taped to his front door, the kind you can't miss even if you wanted to. He grabbed it, already feeling that familiar knot in his stomach. The HOA logo was stamped across the top in bold letters. This was the third notice in 2 months, and each one had gotten nastier than the last. "Final notice of eviction," screamed the header in red ink. David's hands started shaking as he read. $847 in landscaping fees, they claimed. Fees for shrubs he never asked them to plant. Fees for neighborhood beautification that nobody voted on. And now, because he'd refused to pay for something he never wanted, they were going to kick his family out of their home. 72 hours. That's all the time they were giving him. The letter said private enforcement agents would arrive on Saturday morning at 9 to remove his family and their belongings from the property. "Dad, you okay?" His younger daughter, Mia, stood in the doorway holding her stuffed rabbit. She was 7, all big eyes and pigtails. "You look scared." David forced a smile, the kind parents make when they're trying to protect their kids from the ugly truth. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just some boring mail. Where's your sister?" "Lily's doing homework." Mia stepped closer, studying his face the way kids do when they know something's wrong. "Is it about the mean letters? The ones from the neighborhood people?" His heart sank. They'd tried so hard to keep the girls from worrying, but kids always know. They hear the stressed whispers late at night, the phone calls that stop when they walk into the room. "Don't worry about it, Mia Bear. Dad's going to fix it." But even as he said it, David had no idea how. He'd called 3 lawyers already. One told him HOA cases were too small for them to bother with. Another said he'd need a $5,000 retainer just to start. The third never called back. Inside, the house smelled like the cookies Lily was stress baking. His older daughter was 10 going on 30, always trying to help when things got tough. The kitchen counter was covered in chocolate chip cookies, way more than they could eat. "Dad, I made extras for the bake sale," Lily said, not looking up from her homework, but her voice was tight, worried. She'd heard them talking last night, probably more than they realized. David set the letter down on the counter, face down so the girls couldn't see it. His phone felt heavy in his pocket. He needed to call his wife, but she was 3 states away at some training thing. The Army had her for another week or so, they'd said. Katie was always getting called away for exercises, deployments, training missions. It came with the job. He'd learned not to ask too many questions about what she did. Special operations was the phrase she used, followed by that look that said, "Don't push it." He knew she was a Green Beret, one of the first women to make it through the program. He'd seen the medals, the scars, heard the rare stories she'd share after a couple beers, but mostly Katie kept that part of her life separate. Right now, though, he needed her, not the soldier version, just his wife. The woman who could look at a problem and somehow make it less scary. The HOA president, Richard Drummond, was the kind of guy who probably got beat up a lot in high school and never got over it. Now he ran their neighborhood like some kind of dictator, finding reasons to fine people for grass that was a half-inch too long or mailboxes the wrong shade of black. David had watched him reduce their neighbor, old Mrs. Chen, to tears over a garden gnome that violated community standards, and now Drummond had David in his crosshairs. The landscaping fee thing was just an excuse. David had made the mistake of questioning Drummond at a board meeting 6 months ago, asking why they were spending so much money on projects nobody wanted. Drummond's face had gone purple, and from that moment on, David's family became a target. First came the citation for leaving their garbage cans out 15 minutes past the pickup time. Then a warning about their daughter's bike being improperly stored on their own front lawn. Each violation came with a fine, and when David refused to pay for the landscaping work he never authorized, Drummond found his opening. David stepped out onto the back porch, away from the girls, and dialed Katie's number. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same thing. His chest felt tight. "Katie, it's me. It's urgent. They're trying to evict us, the HOA. I know you're training, but I need you to call me back as soon as you can. I don't know what to do." He sent a text too, just in case. "Emergency. Call me." The evening dragged on like torture. David helped Lily with her math homework, his mind only half there. He watched a movie with Mia, some animated thing about talking animals, and couldn't tell you what happened in it. Every few minutes, he checked his phone. By 10 o'clock, both girls were in bed and David sat at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. The original HOA contract they'd signed 8 years ago. The neighborhood bylaws, 50 pages of dense legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Every notice, every fine, every threatening letter. He'd bought this house when Lily was 2. It was supposed to be their forever home. Good schools, safe streets, a backyard where the girls could play. Katie had just finished her training, and they'd needed stability. The HOA seemed annoying but manageable back then. Now it felt like a noose tightening around their necks. His phone buzzed at 11:30. Katie. Finally. David, what's wrong? I just got out of a briefing. He told her everything, the words tumbling out. The eviction notice. The 72 hours. The private security agents. How helpless he felt, how scared. Katie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had changed. Not softer, but harder. Focused. It was the voice she probably used when planning missions. I'll be on a flight in 3 hours, she said. I'm coming home. But your training, this is more important. Listen to me, David. Don't talk to anyone from the HOA. Don't sign anything. Don't let anyone in the house. I'll handle this when I get there. Katie, they're sending guys to physically remove us. What are we supposed to do? They're not going to remove anyone. Her voice was steel-wrapped in calm. I promise you that. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? David realized his hands had stopped shaking. Something in Katie's voice, that absolute certainty, made him believe her. He'd seen her face down challenges before. She didn't panic. She planned. Okay, he said. What do you need me to do? Make copies of everything. Every document, every letter, every email. Put it all in one folder, and get some sleep. You're going to need it. After they hung up, David did exactly what she said. He scanned and copied until his home printer ran out of ink, then drove to the 24-hour drugstore for more. By 3 in the morning, he had a complete file of everything. He finally went to bed, exhausted but somehow less afraid. Katie was coming home, and if there was one thing he knew about his wife, it was this. She didn't lose. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet and dark. In 48 hours, everything would change. But David didn't know that yet. He just knew that the woman he'd married was on her way, and somehow, that made all the difference. Katie walked through her front door at 6:30 in the morning, still wearing her uniform. David had barely slept, tossing and turning all night. But he was up making coffee when he heard her key in the lock. She dropped her duffel bag and pulled him into a hug. For just a moment, she was his wife again. Warm, solid home. Then she stepped back, and he could see the shift in her eyes. She was already working the problem. Where are the girls? She asked, heading straight for the kitchen table where David had organized all the documents. Still sleeping? Katie, you must be exhausted. You just flew. I slept on the plane. She was already reading through the eviction notice, her face calm but focused. Coffee would be good, though. David poured her a cup and watched as she went through every single page. She didn't skim. She read like she was searching for something specific, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Her green beret sat on the table beside her, still shaped perfectly despite the long trip. After about 20 minutes, she looked up. This is garbage. All of it? What do you mean? I mean, legally, this doesn't hold up. They can't just evict you with a letter. That's not how it works. She tapped the notice. They're counting on you not knowing that. Counting on you being scared enough to just leave. I am scared, David admitted. They're sending people to remove us. Private security, not law enforcement. There's a huge difference. Katie stood up and stretched. I need to make some calls. What time is it in California? 3:30 in the morning. Perfect. He'll be up. She pulled out her phone and walked into the living room. David tried not to eavesdrop, but he caught pieces. Yeah, it's me. I need a favor. HOA issue, illegal eviction attempt. No, I'm serious. Can you send me that name? She made 3 more calls. One to someone at the base legal office. One to a lawyer whose number she seemed to have memorized. And one that started with, hey, remember that time in Afghanistan? And ended with her saying, I owe you one. When she came back, she was smiling. Not a happy smile. The kind of smile that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Okay, here's what's happening. First, I've got a lawyer friend who specializes in HOA abuse. He's seen this exact thing 100 times. He's sending over a cease and desist letter that'll be here in an hour. Second, I talked to Base Legal. They're very interested in the fact that someone's trying to illegally evict a military family while I'm on active duty. That violates federal law. Third, I've got a friend at the local news station who's very interested in doing a story about HOA overreach. David stared at her. You set all that up in 20 minutes? That's what I do, honey. I plan missions. She took a sip of coffee. Now here's the fun part. I'm going to invite the HOA board here for a meeting this morning. What? Why would they come? Because I'm going to tell them I want to negotiate a settlement. They think they've won. They think we're desperate, so they'll come to gloat and maybe squeeze more money out of us. Katie's smile got wider, but they're walking into something very different. She spent the next hour setting up the living room. She moved furniture, set up her laptop, positioned a video camera on a tripod. David recognized the look. He'd seen her do this before when helping Lily with a school project about military strategy. Katie was treating this like a tactical operation. You're recording them?
He asked. Everything.
Audio and video. All legal as long as we're on our property and we tell them they're being recorded. She adjusted the camera angle. I want them to see the camera too. Keeps people honest. The girls woke up around 8. Mia ran straight to Katie, nearly knocking her over with a hug. Lily was more reserved, but David could see the relief in her face. Mom, are you going to stop the bad people? Mia asked, still clinging to Katie's legs. Katie knelt down to eye level. Yes, baby, I am. But I need you and Lily to go to Grandma's house for a few hours, okay? Dad's going to drive you over. Because of the meeting with the neighborhood people? Lily asked. She'd always been sharp, that's right. It's going to be boring adult stuff. Lots of paperwork and talking. Katie smoothed Lily's hair. But when you come home later, this is all going to be over. I promise. David drove the girls to his mother's house across town. When he got back, Katie had changed into jeans and a simple blouse. Professional but casual. The only hint of her military background was how straight she stood, how controlled her movements were. They'll be here in 15 minutes, she said. I just got off the phone with Drummond. What did you say to get him to come? I told him we were ready to discuss payment options and that I'd just gotten home from military duty. I may have sounded a little helpless, her eyes sparkled. Men like him love that. At exactly 10 o'clock, 4 cars pulled up outside. David felt his stomach drop. Richard Drummond stepped out of a black Mercedes wearing a suit that probably cost more than David's monthly salary. Behind him came 3 other board members, and bringing up the rear were 2 men in dark pants and security company polo shirts, the enforcement agents. They were real. Katie opened the door before they could knock. Mr. Drummond, thank you for coming. Please, everyone come in. Drummond walked in like he owned the place, his eyes already cataloging everything, probably thinking about how he'd auction it off after the eviction. The board members followed. An older woman named Patricia, who always seemed nervous. A younger guy named Todd, who mostly just agreed with whatever Drummond said. And George Chen, the husband of the woman Drummond had made cry. The security guys stayed outside by their truck. I've set up in the living room, Katie said, gesturing. Can I get anyone water? They settled into the chairs Katie had arranged. That's when Drummond noticed the camera. What's that for? He demanded. Oh, just to keep a record of our discussion, for my records. I'm sure you understand. Katie smiled pleasantly. Everyone okay with being recorded? It's my legal right on my own property, but I want to be transparent. Drummond looked like he wanted to argue, but Patricia spoke up. That's fine with me. Probably smart, actually. Katie sat down, David beside her. She had the folder of documents in front of her, but she didn't open it yet. So, Drummond started, leaning back like he was holding court. Your husband said you wanted to discuss payment. Smart move. If you pay the fees plus the penalty charges by tomorrow, we might be willing to postpone the eviction proceedings. How much would that be total? Katie asked. $1,700. And that's being generous, David felt sick. They didn't have $1,700 just lying around. But Katie didn't flinch. That's interesting, she said, because I've been reading through the HOA bylaws pretty carefully. Fascinating stuff. Did you know that under Section 7, subsection C, any landscaping fee over $500 requires a full board vote with written notice to all homeowners 30 days in advance? Drummond's smile faltered slightly. That's for voluntary projects. Actually, it doesn't specify voluntary or mandatory. It just says landscaping fees, and I can't find any record of such a vote. I checked the meeting minutes for the past year. Katie pulled out a stack of papers. These are all the official minutes posted on the HOA website. No vote. No notice. That's a technicality, Todd said, but he sounded uncertain. Maybe. But here's what's not a technicality. Katie's voice got quieter, more focused. You can't evict someone with a letter. That's not how evictions work. You need to file with the court, get a judgment, have a sheriff execute the eviction order. What you're doing right now is called illegal eviction or constructive eviction. And it's a crime. The room got very quiet. I talked to the county sheriff's office this morning, Katie continued. Lovely conversation. They confirmed that private security has no legal authority to remove anyone from their property. If those two gentlemen outside try to force entry or force us to leave, that's trespassing and assault, which means you, Mr. Drummond, could be charged as an accessory. Drummond's face was turning red. You're bluffing, am I? Katie pulled out her phone, pressed a button, and a voice came through on speaker. Sheriff's Department, Deputy Williams speaking. Hi, Deputy Williams, this is Katie from earlier. I have the HOA board here. Could you repeat what you told me about private evictions? There was a pause, then the deputy's voice, clear and official. Private citizens or companies cannot execute evictions in this county. Only sworn law enforcement with a valid court order. Anyone attempting to forcibly remove residents or their property without such an order could face criminal charges. Thank you. Deputy? Katie ended the call. George Chen was staring at Drummond with an expression David couldn't quite read. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Todd seemed to be trying to disappear into the couch, but Katie wasn't done. She pulled out another document. This is a complaint I've prepared for the State Attorney General's office. It details multiple violations of HOA regulations, including selective enforcement, unauthorized fees, and intimidation tactics. I've also prepared a civil lawsuit for harassment and attempted illegal eviction. Damages start at $50,000. David hadn't known about any of this. He watched his wife lay it out like she was briefing a military operation. Each piece of information precisely placed for maximum impact. You can't prove any of that, Drummond said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Actually, I spent most of last night documenting ever. The silence in the living room was thick enough to cut. David watched Drummond's face go through about 5 different shades of red before settling on something close to purple. The man was used to being the one making threats, not receiving them. Patricia, the older board member, was the first to break. Richard, maybe we should listen to what she's saying. I've been worried about some of our procedures for a while now. Shut up, Patricia, Drummond snapped, then seemed to realize how that sounded on camera. I mean, let's not be hasty. Katie stood up and walked to a small filing cabinet David hadn't even noticed she'd brought into the room. She pulled out a thick binder and set it on the coffee table with a heavy thud. This is every HOA violation notice issued in our neighborhood over the past 3 years. 147 total. Want to guess how many were issued to families who questioned your decisions at board meetings? Nobody answered. 63. That's 43%. Katie opened the binder, showing pages marked with colored tabs. Yellow tabs are families who spoke up at meetings. Within 30 days of speaking, every single one received at least 1 violation notice. Some got 5 or 6. George Chen leaned forward, staring at the binder. Can I see that? Katie slid it over to him. He started flipping through pages, his expression darkening. Mrs. Henderson got fined for a broken fence panel the day after she complained about the dues increase. Mr. Okafor got cited for his mailbox 3 days after asking about the budget. This is retaliation, Katie finished. Systematic harassment of anyone who challenges the board. That's illegal under state HOA regulations. Todd, the younger board member who usually just nodded along, had gone very pale. I didn't know about most of these. Richard handles the violations. Exactly, Katie said. Which brings me to another interesting pattern. She pulled out another document. In the past 3 years, this HOA has paid over $200,000 to Summit Property Services for various projects. Landscaping, repairs, maintenance, and so what? They're a good company, Drummond said. They're also owned by your brother-in-law, James Drummond. That's public record. What's not public is whether these contracts were properly bid or if the board voted on them. Katie looked at each board member. Did any of you vote to award Summit Property Services a contract? Patricia shook her head slowly. Todd looked confused. George said, I thought those were automatic renewals. They're not, Katie said. Every contract over $10,000 requires a board vote per your own bylaws. But I can't find records of those votes, which means either the minutes are incomplete or the votes never happened. Drummond stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You're making wild accusations because you don't want to pay your fees. This meeting is over. Sit down, Richard. George Chen's voice was hard. David had never heard the quiet older man sound like that. I want to hear the rest of this. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Drummond slowly sat back down. His jaw clenched so tight David could see the muscles working. Katie continued, gentler now. Look, I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here to protect my family and make sure this neighborhood operates fairly. George, you remember when your wife got cited for her garden gnome? She cried for 2 days. George nodded, his hands curling into fists. She loved that gnome. Her mother gave it to her before she passed away. The citation said it violated community aesthetic standards, but there's no such rule in the bylaws. I checked. Katie turned pages in another folder. What there is, however, is a rule that says decorative items are allowed unless they're offensive or dangerous. A garden gnome is neither. Patricia spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. Richard told us it was gaudy and brought down property values. He said we had to maintain standards. Whose standards? Katie asked. Not the community's, not the bylaws. His personal preferences became HOA law, and anyone who disagreed got punished. She pulled out yet another document. This is the HOA budget from 2 years ago. The board approved $40,000 for community beautification. Can anyone tell me what that money bought? Silence, because I drove around the neighborhood taking pictures. The fountain in the front entrance was already there. The sign is the same. The landscaping at the entrance looks identical to 3 years ago based on Google Street View. Katie showed photos on her laptop. So where did $40,000 go? Todd was sweating now. Richard said it was maintenance and planning costs for work that Summit Property Services did. Richard's brother-in-law's company. Katie let that sink in. Now, I'm not saying money was stolen, but I am saying the financial records need to be audited by an independent accounting firm, which, by the way, homeowners have the right to request under state law. Drummond finally exploded. You think you're so smart coming in here with your military background and your fancy research? You're just one person. The rest of the neighborhood is fine with how things are run. Are they? Katie pulled out her phone again. I've spent the past 2 weeks reaching out to other families. With permission, I'd like to play you something. She pressed play and a woman's voice filled the room. Hi, this is Janet Rodriguez from Maple Street. I got your message about the HOA issues. God, yes, I have problems. They fined us $800 last year for painting our shutters the wrong shade of gray. Wrong shade. We had to repaint them twice and they still said it wasn't right. We eventually gave up and just paid the fine because we couldn't afford to keep buying paint. Katie skipped forward. Another voice, this one older. This is Tom from Oak Lane. They made me tear out my vegetable garden because it wasn't ornamental enough. My wife and I are on a fixed income. That garden saved us maybe $100 a month in groceries. But apparently tomatoes aren't pretty enough for Mr. Drummond. Another voice. And another. 7 total. Each one telling a story of fines, intimidation, and arbitrary rules. When it finished, Patricia had tears in her eyes. I didn't know it was this bad. Richard, you told us these were just standard enforcement actions. They are, Drummond insisted, but his voice had lost its power. Every neighborhood has rules. People need to follow them. But do the rules need to be cruel? George Chen stood up and David realized the older man was shaking with anger. My wife cried over a garden gnome. Janet Rodriguez had to paint her shutters 3 times. Tom lost his vegetable garden. These are our neighbors, Richard. Our community, and you've been treating them like enemies. Katie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. That's interesting timing. The lawyer I mentioned earlier just got a response from the county clerk's office. Apparently, this HOA hasn't filed proper annual reports in 2 years. That's a state law requirement. The penalty is suspension of HOA enforcement powers until the reports are filed and approved. The room went dead silent. What does that mean? Todd asked. It means legally this HOA can't enforce anything right now. No fines, no violations, certainly no evictions. Katie looked at Drummond. Did you know about the missing reports? He didn't answer, but his face said everything. Patricia stood up, her hands trembling. I've been on this board for 5 years. I joined because I wanted to help maintain our neighborhood and protect property values. But this isn't what I signed up for. Richard, did you deliberately not file those reports? It was an oversight, he muttered. An oversight that let you keep collecting fees and issuing fines while the HOA had no legal standing? George Chen shook his head. That's not an oversight. That's fraud. David watched it all unfold, barely able to believe what he was seeing. His wife had walked in hours ago, and now the entire HOA power structure was collapsing like a house of cards. Katie pulled out one more document, this one official-looking with a government seal. This is a letter from the Service Members Civil Relief Act office. I'm active-duty military. My family has special protections under federal law. What you attempted to do, threatening eviction while I was on duty orders, violates federal statute. The penalties include fines up to $10,000 and potential jail time. Drummond looked like he might throw up. Here's what I think happened, Katie said, her voice calm and almost gentle. I think you started out wanting to run a good neighborhood, but somewhere along the way it became about power, about control. Maybe you gave your brother-in-law a contract as a favor, and then you had to give him another to cover for the first one. Maybe people started questioning you, and instead of listening, you punished them, and it snowballed. She sat back down. So here's my offer, and it's the only one you're going to get. 1, you resign from the board effective immediately. 2, you cooperate with a full financial audit of the HOA. 3, you withdraw all pending violations and fees for every family in this neighborhood. 4, you agree never to serve on this HOA board again. And if I don't? Drummond asked, but there was no fight left in his voice. Then I file everything. The civil suit, the federal complaint, the state attorney general investigation, and I call my friend at the news station. By tonight, your face will be on every local channel as the HOA president who tried to illegally evict a military family. How do you think that'll play? Patricia looked at Drummond with something like pity. Richard, take the deal, please, before this gets worse. George nodded. We'll accept your resignation. And The week after Drummond resigned felt like watching dominoes fall. David had never seen anything quite like it. On Monday morning, Katie filed for a full financial audit with the state HOA oversight office. By Tuesday, they'd assigned an investigator. Wednesday brought a reporter from Channel 7 who'd heard about the story from Katie's friend. They didn't want to do the interview, but when 3 other families from the neighborhood showed up offering their stories, Katie agreed. David watched from the kitchen as his wife sat on their front porch, professional and calm, explaining what had happened. Not bragging, just stating facts. The reporter kept trying to make it a dramatic story about a military hero taking down corruption, but Katie kept redirecting. This isn't about me, she said. This is about a community that deserves fair treatment. About families who are being punished for speaking up. That's not how neighborhoods should work. By Thursday, the story had spread beyond local news. A state senator's office called asking questions. Katie spent an hour on the phone explaining the situation, and David heard her say multiple times, I'm not looking for attention. I just want my neighborhood fixed. But Friday was when things got really interesting. Patricia called Katie's phone at 8 in the morning. David heard his wife say, slow down, what? And then she was grabbing her keys. I'll be right there. What's wrong? David asked. Emergency HOA meeting. Apparently people heard about the audit and there are some very angry neighbors showing up. Katie paused at the door. Want to come? They arrived at the community center to find the parking lot packed. At least 50 people were there. Way more than had ever attended a regular meeting. David recognized some faces, neighbors he'd waved to for years. Others he'd never met. Inside, the small meeting room was standing room only. Patricia, George, and Todd sat at the front table, looking overwhelmed. When Katie walked in, several people started clapping. She looked uncomfortable but gave a small wave. Okay, everyone, Patricia called out, her voice shaky. Thank you for coming. As you may have heard, Richard Drummond has resigned from the board, and we're conducting a full financial review of the HOA operations. About time, someone called out from the back. An older man David recognized from 3 streets over stood up. I've lived here 19 years. 19 years. And I've watched this place turn from a nice community into something that feels like a prison. My son came to visit last month and parked his truck on the street overnight. I got a violation notice the next day with a $50 fine. My kids can't play basketball in our driveway after 6 p.m., a woman added. Do you know how hard it is to tell a 10-year-old they can't shoot hoops because the HOA says it's too loud? We got fined for having a political sign during the election, another voice said. First Amendment doesn't apply here, apparently. Patricia held up her hands. We hear you, all of you, and we're going to fix this, but we need your help. George Chen stood up. The truth is, we let this happen. Some of us knew things were wrong and stayed quiet. I'm guilty of that. My wife was harassed over a garden gnome, and I just told her to take it down to keep the peace. His voice cracked slightly. I should have fought for her. I should have fought for all of you. The room got quiet. So here's what we're proposing, George continued. We're going to rewrite the bylaws from scratch. But we're not going to do it behind closed doors. We want input from everyone. What rules actually matter? What's fair? What protections do homeowners need? Todd, who'd always been Drummond's yes man, surprised everyone by speaking up. I owe everyone here an apology. I went along with things I knew were wrong because it was easier than standing up. Richard had strong opinions and I let him run things. That's on me. Katie had been standing in the back, but Patricia gestured for her to come forward. Katie, you've put a lot of work into researching this. Would you be willing to help us draft new bylaws? I'm not running for the board, Katie said immediately. I want to make that clear. But yes, I'll help. On one condition. What's that? Everything is transparent. Every meeting is open. Every decision is voted on. Every penny is accounted for. No more backroom deals, no more retaliation. No more secret budgets. The room erupted in applause. Over the next 2 weeks, Katie spent her evenings at the dining room table, surrounded by HOA regulations from other neighborhoods, state laws, and legal templates. David would bring her coffee and find her making charts, organizing information the way she probably organized military operations. You're really good at this, he said one night, looking over her shoulder at a detailed spreadsheet comparing different HOA fee structures. It's like mission planning, she said. You gather intelligence, identify objectives, develop a strategy, execute. Same skills, different application. Mia wandered in wearing her pajamas. Mommy, are you still working on the neighborhood stuff? Just finishing up for tonight, baby. Katie pulled Mia into her lap. But look, see this? I'm making rules that are fair for everyone. So families like ours don't get picked on. Are the mean people gone? The mean person is gone. And we're making sure no one else can be mean like that again. Lily appeared in the doorway holding her phone. Mom, you're trending on Twitter. I'm what? Trending. Someone posted the news story and now everyone's talking about HOA problems. There's a hashtag. Horrorform. Lily showed her the phone. Thousands of tweets, people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Katie looked slightly horrified. I don't want to be trending. Too late, Lily said, grinning. You're like internet famous now. Some people are calling you the HOA slayer. David laughed at the expression on Katie's face, somewhere between pride and embarrassment. The state auditor's report came back 3 weeks after Drummond's resignation. Patricia called a special meeting to review the findings, and once again, the community center was packed. The auditor, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, didn't waste time. In 20 years of reviewing HOA finances, I've rarely seen such concerning patterns. Over the past 3 years, approximately $190,000 was paid to Summit Property Services without proper competitive bidding. Additionally, violation fines totaling $43,000 were collected, but not properly allocated according to the HOA's stated budget. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Where did that money go? Someone called out. Some appears to have gone to legitimate expenses, but there are significant unexplained disbursements totaling approximately $65,000. We've referred our findings to the district attorney's office for review. David felt Katie tense beside him. This had gone beyond HOA drama into potential criminal territory. The auditor continued. Additionally, we found evidence of selective enforcement, with violation notices disproportionately targeting homeowners who had expressed dissent at board meetings. This constitutes harassment under state HOA regulations. After the meeting, people crowded around Katie. Janet Rodriguez, the woman who'd been forced to repaint her shutters 3 times, hugged her. You saved us, all of us. I didn't do it alone, Katie said, and there's still work to do. We need to make sure this never happens again. Tom, the older man who'd lost his vegetable garden, shook her hand. My wife and I want to help with the new bylaws committee. We've got time, and we've got opinions. By the end of the evening, they had a committee of 12 people representing different streets and different age groups. Katie helped them organize, set meeting schedules, and develop a framework for gathering community input. The new bylaws took 2 months to complete. They held 4 community forums where anyone could speak. They posted drafts online for feedback. They revised and revised again. David watched Katie facilitate meetings with the same calm precision she brought to everything else. When arguments broke out about what rules were necessary, she'd redirect. What's the actual problem we're trying to solve? Let's focus on that. When someone wanted revenge against Drummond, she'd remind them, we're not about punishment. We're about building something better. The final bylaws were nothing like the old ones. Violation notices required photo evidence and a warning period. Fines over $100 needed board approval with 2/3 vote. Any contract over $5,000 required competitive bids. Board meetings were mandatory monthly, with published agendas and minutes. Financial reports had to be posted quarterly. Most importantly, there was a new grievance process. If a homeowner felt they'd been treated unfairly, they could appeal to a committee of randomly selected residents, not just the board. Real checks and balances. The vote to adopt the new bylaws was held on a Saturday in June. Out of 243 homes in the neighborhood, 208 voted. The bylaws passed with 87% approval. Patricia, George, and Todd all ran for re-election to the board. 2 new members were elected too, Janet Rodriguez and Tom from Oak Lane. The board that had been Drummond's rubber stamp was now accountable to the community. At the first meeting under the new bylaws, George Chen made a motion that brought the room to tears. I move that we issue formal apologies to every family that was wrongly cited or fined under the previous administration, and that we refund any fees paid for invalid violations. It passed unanimously. Katie helped draft the apology letters. David read over her shoulder. 3 months after the bylaws passed, Katie was in the garage organizing camping gear when someone knocked on the door. David answered it to find a young couple he didn't recognize, maybe late 20s, looking nervous. Hi, the woman said. I'm sorry to bother you. Are you the family that had the HOA trouble? The ones on the news? David called for Katie, who came out wiping dust off her hands. I'm Katie, can I help you? The couple introduced themselves as Angela and Ben. They'd just bought a house 2 neighborhoods over. We got our first violation notice today, Angela said, her voice shaking. We've lived there 3 weeks. They're saying our mailbox is the wrong height and we need to repaint it or pay a $300 fine. Katie's expression shifted into what David called her mission face. Come in, let's talk. Over the next hour, Katie walked them through everything. How to check if the violation was legitimate according to their bylaws. How to request documentation. How to file a formal grievance. She gave them the name of the lawyer who'd helped her. Showed them how to research their HOA's financial filings. You don't have to do this alone, Katie said, and you don't have to just accept it if it's wrong. After they left, David found Katie standing in the kitchen, staring out the window. You okay? He asked. That's the 4th family that's reached out this month. From 4 different HOAs, she turned to him. It's everywhere, David, not just Drummond. The same patterns. Petty harassment, selective enforcement, people scared in their own homes. What are you thinking? I don't know yet, but something needs to change. Bigger than just our neighborhood. The next day, Katie got a call from Congressman Mitchell, the one she'd served with. They talked for over an hour. When she hung up, she had that look David recognized. She'd found a new mission. He wants to introduce federal HOA reform legislation, she said, but he needs real examples, data, testimony from people affected. He asked if I'd help put together a report. That's a lot of work. I know. She smiled. Good thing I'm qualified. Over the next 2 months, Katie became the unofficial expert on HOA abuse. She created a website where people could submit their stories. Within a week, she had over 300 submissions. Within a month, over 2,000. She categorized them, looking for patterns. Illegal eviction attempts, selective enforcement, financial irregularities, retaliation against dissent. The same problems over and over in communities across the country. David watched her work with a mix of pride and concern. She was still doing her regular military duties, still being a mom to their girls, and now she'd taken on this massive project. You don't have to save everyone, he said one night when she was still at the computer at midnight. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm trying to make sure everyone has the tools to save themselves. She showed him a document she'd created. Look at this. A step-by-step guide for challenging unfair HOA practices. Legal resources. Template letters. Everything I learned organized so anyone can use it. You're making a manual, that's what I do. I make manuals, she grinned. This one just happens to be for fighting HOA tyranny instead of actual combat. The guide went viral. National news picked up the story. Suddenly, Katie was being asked to speak at community meetings in other cities, to talk to advocacy groups, even to testify before a state legislative committee. But she never forgot where it started. Every Saturday morning, she held what she called office hours at the local coffee shop. Anyone with HOA problems could come talk to her for free. She'd review their documents, give advice, connect them with resources. David brought the girls one Saturday to meet her for lunch. The coffee shop was packed. Katie sat at a corner table surrounded by papers and stressed-looking people. She saw them and waved but held up 5 fingers. 5 more minutes, Mommy's really busy, Mia observed. Mommy's helping people, Lily corrected, like always. They watched as Katie finished with an elderly man hugging him as he left with tears in his eyes. Then she packed up her papers and joined her family. Sorry. That took longer than expected. Mr. Peterson was being forced to remove his wheelchair ramp because it violated aesthetic standards. She shook her head. Can you believe that? A wheelchair ramp. Did you help him? Mia asked. I will. His HOA board is about to get a very educational letter about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Katie smiled. But enough about that. Who wants ice cream? The congressional hearing happened in September. Katie flew to Washington and testified for 40 minutes, laying out the systemic problems with HOA governance and proposing solutions. She brought copies of her research, examples from real families, data on the scope of the problem. David watched the live stream from work, his co-workers gathering around his desk. Katie was calm, professional, devastating. She had numbers, legal precedents, and story after story of families being harassed in their own homes. This isn't about eliminating HOAs, she told the committee. Many serve important functions, but they need accountability. They need transparency. They need to remember that they exist to serve homeowners, not to control them. When one congressman tried to dismiss HOA problems as minor disputes between neighbors, Katie didn't back down. With respect, sir, losing your home over a garden gnome isn't a minor dispute. Being fined $300 because your grass is half an inch too tall isn't a minor dispute. Having your children questioned by strangers because they're playing basketball in your own driveway isn't a minor dispute. The video clip went viral. Within days, it had been viewed millions of times. Back home, things settled into a new normal. The neighborhood had monthly community gatherings now, actual social events where people connected. The girls made friends with kids they'd never really met before, even though they'd lived on the same streets for years. Mrs. Chen invited them over for dinner one evening. Her dining room walls were covered with photos of her children and grandchildren. The garden gnome sat in a place of honor on the mantel. I want to show you something, she said to Katie. She pulled out a scrapbook filled with articles about the HOA fight. I'm keeping this for my grandchildren, so they know that sometimes one person standing up can change everything. It wasn't just me, Katie protested. Patricia and George and Todd stepped up. The whole community came together. But you started it, Mrs. Chen insisted. You showed us it was possible to fight back, that we didn't have to just accept being treated badly. On the drive home, Lily asked, Mom, do you think what you did will actually change things? Like everywhere? Katie thought about it. I don't know, honey. Maybe not everywhere. But if even a few communities see what we did and decide to stand up for themselves, that's something. And if the laws change to protect people better, that's something too. What if they don't change? Then we keep working. We keep helping people. We keep showing that there's a better way. Katie glanced at David. That's all we can do. Show up, do the work, and hope it matters. December brought the results of the district attorney's investigation into Drummond. Criminal charges were filed. Fraud, embezzlement, violation of fiduciary duty. The trial would be months away, but just seeing his mugshot on the news brought relief to a lot of people. Katie refused to comment to reporters. The justice system will handle it. I'm focused on preventing the next Drummond, not punishing the last one. The Congressional HOA Reform Bill was introduced in January. It didn't have everything advocates wanted, but it had the key pieces: mandatory financial transparency, protection against retaliatory enforcement, clear eviction procedures, and a federal complaint process for serious violations. Whether it would pass was anyone's guess. Congress moved slowly, but state legislatures started picking up the ideas. 3 states introduced similar bills. 1 passed. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Katie continued her Saturday office hours. The crowd had gotten smaller over time, which she said was a good thing. Means fewer people are having problems, or more people know how to handle them. On a cold Saturday in February, David brought the girls to meet Katie after her session. They found her talking to a young woman who looked familiar. "Angela," Katie said, hugging her. "How's everything going?" Angela from months ago, the one with the mailbox violation, was beaming. "We joined the board. Me and Ben. And we're rewriting the bylaws using your guide as a template. It's happening." Real change. After she left, Mia tugged on Katie's sleeve. "Mommy, did you fix her neighborhood too?" "No, baby. She fixed her own neighborhood. I just showed her how." That night, David found Katie in their bedroom looking at something on her phone. She was crying. "What's wrong?" he asked, worried. She showed him an email. "It's from a woman in Ohio. Her HOA was trying to evict her over medical equipment in her yard. She used my guide, fought back, and won. She's keeping her house. That's good news." "Why are you crying?" "Because she ends the email saying, 'Thank you for teaching me I didn't have to be afraid.' That's..." Katie wiped her eyes. "That's why I did all of this. So people know they don't have to be afraid in their own homes." Spring came to the neighborhood. The gardens bloomed. Kids rode bikes. People sat on their porches in the evening. The HOA board organized a community barbecue, the first one in years. Nearly every family came. There was food, music, kids running around. It felt like what a neighborhood should feel like. Tom unveiled his veget.